Not really many people, but welcome on in, guys. Roy, congrats on the first. Um, yep. Okay. Alright, we're gonna turn you off. That's probably why it was off in the first place. Okay. Um, so, I do have to admit this is certainly out of the blue for me. Um, Especially where I don't really talk about stuff in my personal life and whatnot, but especially with what happened overnight, I feel like it's basically time. I'm okay with it at this point. Um, so I'll just go over everything, and then once I finish, go back to the break screen so I can officially set up for some Uncharted stuff. So, uh, where to start? So, basically, if you guys have known me for a while, there's been a lot of people that have gotten to know me since the pandemic started. Um, that's when I really started trying to make a push for streaming. So that's where a lot of the current people I know from my stream is from. So we're gonna delve back in time. But a lot of you probably know, I struggle a lot with depression over the last few years, mainly from the way that my previous relationship ended. So I want to talk a little about that, as well as what happened last night, because it's honestly, I feel like it's a very notable thing that ended up happening last night. So um essentially, my relationship with my ex, we originally met when I was trying to go to college for a second time. Um, I was going to Boston College originally, but I had a lot of struggles living on campus, and that was partially because there was just a lot of alcohol on campus, and when I left, I was only 17 when I left from high school, going to live on my own on a college campus. At the time, the relationship with my dad was very strained because he was an alcoholic. Um, and one of the biggest things with living on campus was there was just so much alcohol around, so much more than I'd ever expected, basically. Um, like, I knew there would be alcohol on campus, but it was just so much more. So I ended up, um, not only was there that realization, there was also just me taking a workload that was way too much at the time. I'll be honest, when, the last few years of high school, I wasn't even really trying, and I was taking these course loads where, one semester in particular, I was doing physics, stats, and calculus 1. So I was doing a lot of work and a lot of math, and I was getting through them really easily. A lot of times I wasn't even taking homework home. I was able to finish the homework in school, so by the time I got to college, I didn't think course load would be that much of an issue. So my class load ended up, instead of being 5 courses in the semester, I chose, I was going to try to do chemistry and math double major, because chemistry really interested me and math had... I learned a love for chemistry in 11th grade, and math was, to me, it was basically a second language for me. So the original plan was for me to try to double major with both. So that first semester at college, I was part of the marching band, which that took away 2 nights of practice, which both those practices were about 3 hours in length. And then every other Saturday when we had a game, basically, that would take the full Saturday. So that was, 2 nights and a full day, basically, out of my schedule right off the bat. But my course load on top of that, I ended up loading way too much on the course load. I was doing my my course list. If you're ready for this, I was signed up for the easy ones, which was a theology class, which that was a requirement of the school. Just getting that out of the way early on. I was doing a writing class, which that I figured would be an easier load to manage. But then really the hard hitters was doing Calculus 2, Physics, and Chemistry. And the real reason that those 3 were the sticklers, Calculus 2, I'll be honest, so the other thing too is I broke my ankle my senior year of high school. So basically what had happened was, like, I lost a lot of knowledge about the subjects that I had finished that senior year, that triple course load. Especially Calculus 1, I lost a lot of the information I had because I was, I was on a lot of pain medications. Even if, I had a lower amount, I definitely lost a lot of information. So that made the Calculus 2 rough until one day I kind of remembered how everything went. But then the other double whammy was the physics and the chemistry. Because with those classes, it wasn't just calculus and physics I had to do, right? It wasn't just course 4 and course 5. Each of those classes had an additional lab that you had to do. And then on top of that, there was an additional group that each one had that you had to participate in. So I wasn't just doing 5 classes. I was essentially doing 9 classes. So 9 classes on top of, the band just surrounded by alcohol everywhere. It was definitely too much for me. So I had started off on the wrong foot, and after a while depression just took over. I ended up stopping going to classes, and eventually, obviously my grades were not good enough, so the best course of action was to drop out. And if I wanted to return, I would need to make up those credits at another college to be able to even have a chance to go. So following year, I ended up trying to go to UMass Boston, and trying to do that on top of part-time work. Again, that was certainly a bit troublesome for me. And then to complicate matters, I ended up, the car I had at the time had really poor brakes, and I ended up in a just a fender bender, but it was on the highway, and that just ended up putting me in another kind of depressive state. But it was during that time I actually had met my ex. So this was 2009. We ended up just meeting in the college's game room, because that day I had the accident. Instead of going to class, I just hung out in that room for the day, and so we were just friends, and we hung out at different points, and there was chemistry, there was all that, and after we hung out for the summer, we just kind of lost touch, and that was that for a while. Fast forward to 2013, and I remember I was hanging out with my cousin at their place, and just randomly going through my phone looking at old contacts, I stumbled upon her contact, and I'm like, it's been a while. We had fun together. I wonder what she's been up to. So ended up contacting her. We texted a lot, and push comes to shove, and we ended up starting dating. And at the beginning it was really weird and really rough, and part of the thing was just her ex at the time. There was just a lot of kerfuffle with all of that, and I feel like that in a way should have been a red flag to me, but really didn't click at the time. I'm not good with reading the room, reading the flags. I had only had one. So at that point, I had only dated one person in real life. That was just for a month in junior year of high school, like in the summer between junior and senior year. That just felt more like lust than love, so I ended up breaking that off. And then the only other person I had dated was just somebody I knew in the rock band community, and that was only online dating because she lived in Canada. But the thing was, she was going through so much, and I couldn't be there for her at all, and I made the tough decision to break up with her, just because I knew I wasn't going to be able to support her like somebody, actually in the area could support her. She's doing good now. I want to say I talked to her a little bit, maybe like 6 years ago. But she found somebody. She settled down. She has at least one kid now. So in the end, I think it was it's the right choice. So I'm losing my train of thought. I apologize, but so now it's me and my ex, we started dating. Again, there were just red flags at the beginning I never really picked up on. I thought we were going out, but she ended up going back to the ex and whatnot, and it was a mess until it finally resolved itself, basically, where she ended up eventually leaving him and started dating me officially. So part of the thing was we were living really far away from each other, and she didn't drive. I mean, even the whole relationship, she never learned to drive, which is fine. We lived in an area where you could get by with just public transportation, so it didn't really, it didn't matter too much. But originally, what I was doing when we were first hanging out is because my mom actually worked basically on the south side of the greater Boston area in Quincy. So what I would do is I would wake up super early in the morning so I could go to work with her. And the plan was I would just meet my ex in the downtown area so we could hang out. And that actually led to me getting the dental job I had. Because while I was just sitting at the office waiting for time to pass, the office at the time was starting to transition to being digital. So they were scanning all the charts, converting everything to digital, to digital PDF files within the system and whatnot. So I had a couple hours to burn. Any morning I did that, so I would just sit in that back office and just scan charts for my mom and for the office, basically. And the thing is, my mom, who was the manager, she shared the same office space as the director of the office, the basically the the main dentist of the practice, was the director. So he was the one that saw the work ethic I was putting in. So when they realized they needed somebody at the front desk to hire for this, for the conversion of reading charts, he was actually the one that suggested hiring me. And the biggest thing was my mom and I had to have a discussion because, obviously it's mother and son working together, so it was just making sure we'd all be okay with everything. And we were pretty good about it, so it worked out pretty well. And I mean, I was with that company for quite a long time, so I think it would have been more, and there was a chance for me to become a manager at some point if the company, the owners of the company didn't sell. Because the company, the way that it changed afterwards was, it went from being a very family-oriented kind of practice to being about chasing money, I feel like. But during that time, like right at the start, I was able to, I got my car, the car I lost in 2020. Bought that new. It was a showroom floor model. I love that car. There was things were looking really good, and at that point there were discussions between me and the ex, since we were so far apart, um, of possibly just, maybe it was maybe about a month or two after we had started dating, but we threw the idea of trying to find an apartment, you know, midway between where we were both living, to be able to just make it easier for the relationship. So we did. We got a shared account so we could, have our rent in one account together. That was pretty much the only reason for that account, and like I said, just made it easier for rent specifically to pull the money that way. And we were living together. We were doing fine for a while. Then after maybe about a year and a half, that's when things started to kind of change a little, because that's when she was getting into marijuana. And of course, I had previously passed on trying it before. My sister was doing it towards the end of high school, and she would offer to me, but I always passed up. I figured I was too young, but by that point, I wanted to, do things with my then girlfriend, and partake in the things that she enjoyed. And at first it was fine, but going back to my dad with the alcoholism, in hindsight, probably, I definitely let it be a bit too much. And certainly there are points now, where I definitely, make it too much, especially when I get depressed. I will say it's very useful for me to help me sleep and whatnot, but in a way I feel like I also abuse those thoughts, and what ends up happening is I end up just smoking way more throughout the day. But the problem was once she introduced me to it, and I started going a bit off the rails. And it was for me, I basically turned into one of those anti-drug ads, the girl on the couch just turning into a husk kind of a thing. But I never felt like she was really supportive of like what the real issue was. I mean, she did want me to stop, but it just, I don't know. It's weird to say, but I definitely, as Roy just said, I never found the balance, and over time it didn't get better. I wouldn't say it was totally bad, but it definitely was not good. It wasn't completely healthy. So at some point we were we had talked about trying to find a cheaper place to stay at because the rent for where we were paying was just getting to be way too expensive. And even with all our issues, we had talked about trying to possibly start saving for a house and all of that. So eventually we found out that basically a family friend had rooms at the place his son was staying at. His son recently, in that time, had a disability that was starting to form that really just took away a lot of his mobility. So he couldn't even use the upstairs of the place he was at. So we talked with him. We made agreement to, rent from there, and it was going to be so much cheaper than what we were paying for. And on top of that, not, we had the two main rooms that were upstairs, but we also had, free access to a much bigger kitchen and, anything else we wanted. And it was around that time that, the doom wheels were basically churning in our relationship. But really the kicker for all of it was after we had moved. So part of the thing was she was getting into competitive Melee, because some of the friends that she had did a lot of competitive Melee, and we hung out with them, we played Melee with them, and she wanted to become more competitive. So she would hang out at that place a lot. We'd hang out all together. We'd there was a lot of smoking going on there while we're playing and all that. And so this is probably the hardest part. So thanks, Aunt. Have fun with your work there. So by the point that we moved, she was going over there quite a bit. Because part of the thing too is anytime that I would try to practice with her, she would always get upset anytime that I won. And I feel like part of that was just because I didn't want to be competitive in Melee in terms of actually competing, but I was still, I was still good at the game. And in a way that should have been another red flag, but I was just trying to support her. And I tried to push her for a lot of different things. Like she wanted to go back to college, and I tried to push her to to help her make the push to go back and take a couple of classes per semester and whatnot. But she never followed through. And eventually, over time, I will admit I made my share of mistakes. I'm not totally blameless in the whole thing. But it was maybe about was maybe about 2 weeks after we had moved into our new place, and I ended up getting a message from that guy's then girlfriend, saying that him and my girlfriend at the time were cheating on me and her. And I'll be honest, I didn't want to believe it. I didn't feel like even though our relationship wasn't the strongest, I feel like I didn't do anything that warranted that. So I just thought, that couldn't be right. But she, she ended up, when she came home, she spilled the beans and confessed that she was in fact, cheating on me with that guy. And honestly, I went into probably the darkest point of my life. Like, I really didn't know what to do. I resorted to drinking a lot, but that only lasted for a couple weeks. But it was really bad. To put it in perspective, I ended up going through 3.5 liters. Sorry, went through about 3.5 liters of rum in about 2 weeks, and I was getting drunk to the point where, for me, so the thing is, for me, my hangover, I don't get the headache that a lot of people do when I'm hungover. I basically just stay drunk. I stay tipsy. So what was happening is I was showing up to work still tipsy, and that was obviously not a good thing at all. So 2016 was easily, the worst part of my life. Like, 3.5 years, I was, after the move, I was planning on really starting to save for an engagement ring and a possible proposal, but obviously that never came to fruition. I thought I just thought it was a rough patch we were going through and stuff we had to work through, and there was definitely a lack of communication towards the end that just broke it all down. So, in a way, the feeling I had was just, I felt like I was, with the move and all of that, I felt like I was just kind of left at that new place to die on my own in a way. And things were to the point where, and I've said this before to closer friends, if I had any kind of access to a firearm in 2016, I 1,000% would not be here. So in the aftermath, like I said, there was just a lot of drinking at the beginning, but then I really leaned heavily into smoking, but I made sure not to do it before work. It was always, after work, but the other thing that ended up happening, and I've mentioned this to other friends before, was, especially in the immediate aftermath, there would be times where I'd look over and I would see my ex, and like, especially when I would wake up in bed and see her next to me, and that was easily one of the worst feelings. And it's the reason, it is literally the sole reason why I bought myself a Daki. For those that don't know what a Daki is, it's a full body pillow that you get a full body pillow, and the Daki is the basically the pillowcase that goes over it, but the pillowcase typically has an anime character on it. So I ended up I was really getting into Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid at the time, so I got two of, the least lewd ones that I possibly could, just so I could have, some kind of different face to look at. And it certainly helped. It really did help, so that was one thing I gladly did. So fast forward a little bit, it was, I had changed dental companies because the one I was at, like I said, the original owner sold, and it was becoming increasingly clear that all the changes that they were making was to, just try to get as much money as they could from patients, instead of being about, instead of being the main focus being about the patient and the care and all of that. So my mom ended up getting me out, getting me a job at she didn't get me the job at another company, but she knew somebody that had started at a different dental office, so it's just a matter of getting the job there. So I applied, got the job, and then a few weeks later, because the manager at the time when I started, she was basically already out the door. Like, she was there for a week when I was there. And my mom ended up applying for the manager position and, got it. And part of the thing was, at the beginning, she just told me not to bring up, obviously the mother-son relationship, so I didn't, even when coworkers asked me about it, because apparently there were inklings of it. I, just didn't say anything about it. But that job lasted for a year before before I just got. I'll be honest. There was a severe lack of training in terms of what the home office expected of us, and that was coupled with the fact that one of the coworkers that I originally started with, she actually purposefully mistrained me and the other new hire that had just started, because she was worried about losing her job when we were there just to support and help, not to take her job. So, we had learned so many things wrong for so long. A lot of people just weren't doing what they needed to, and on top of everything else in my personal life that had happened, I ended up one day after a year. It was on a Friday. I just walked out. I just straight up punched out and walked out. So obviously that wasn't met with the best. Had a meeting with the president about everything, and it was just in the best interest for both parties to essentially, fire me so I could get unemployment. But there was pretty much no way I could work there anymore. But the thing was, I tried to, communicate with the president just like what was going on and the whole reason for the walkout, and just the personal frustrations of the company, and it really was just a revolving door. And I'll just say there is a reason that it just from top to bottom it really was not well structured, and is a reason that the job itself essentially became a revolving door of hires coming in and out. And I tried to address the problems, but apparently, nothing changed. And it's funny because, in the time that my mom and I started working for this company, we had really turned the practice around and, started we're making really good results, and we were consistently, the office went from being one of the bottoms of the whole franchise to being one of the tops. And basically after that whole thing, and I got fired and she ended up leaving a few months later, that practice just went back downhill. So in a way, it's good to see the karma, but at the same time, it's it's still a negative thing. Obviously, you don't. I don't wish for things to fail, but sometimes they just do because of. But anyway, so in that time, I had moved out and away from where I was living before too. It was just becoming a little too much being there. Yeah, so I tried in 2020 before the pandemic started. I tried for one more dental office. Before that as well, I did work for my stepdad because he does food safety. He does health inspections and HACCP plans and all of that. So I worked for him for a while, but honestly, I problem for me is that the job really was not for me. There was just a lot of interactions with people, and me having to do rule enforcement with, because I was doing a lot of health inspections of restaurants themselves, and the job just was not for me. So after a couple months, I let them know, but at that point, I wasn't making any money. I wasn't really able to pay rent for my mom's place, and the decision was made for me to live with them. So that's where I currently am now. I'm living with my mom and my stepdad again. Especially because part of the reason for that too, and I just realized I glossed over it. Part of the reason for that was back in 2018, and this is part of the reason for me having my cat Sakamoto. At one point before I got him, I just got to a depressed point again that was really, really bad for me. And basically what I ended up doing was I had always taken Benadryl as a kid to help me get to sleep. One of my issues was getting I always had an issue falling asleep. So when I was a kid, my pediatrician actually recommended on those nights that I could use Benadryl for the side effects of drowsiness, and it worked really well, and it was something I didn't do it all the time, but on some nights where I just couldn't get to sleep, it was a good way to do it. But I got to the point where my thought process was, I'm gonna take some extra of the Benadryl, and if I don't wake up, that's fine by me. That's the point I got to. So basically, my mom, she was really worried. She came over after I had done that for 3 days, and she noticed that I was pretty messed up, basically, by that point. So I went to the emergency room, which led into basically a drug rehab place in a way, and they would try different medications at that point, see if anything helped. I got put on not Xanax, but the other kind of antidepressant to see if that would help anything. I can't remember what the other main antidepressant is. I always forget the name of it. But I had a huge side effect where I actually couldn't I couldn't pee at all. And of course that was a really bad thing, obviously. Not just because of bladder fullness, but apparently one of the things with that medication was a side effect, and eventually, prolonged issues like that were just going to cause kidney issues. So got off that really quick. And honestly, I've always been against medication myself, and I think that just helped solidify that. So the problem with a lot of the stuff I've been going through recently, is, after 2020, like I said, I tried to do the go dental route one more time. But the doctor at the practice was doing a lot of HIPAA breaches in terms of speaking with, people that weren't the patients about procedures being done without any kind of acknowledgement of, any kind of consent and stuff like that. And things were being billed out to insurance companies that were never started, and so there was HIPAA violations, insurance fraud, and just the way that he treated the female staff. There were only a small group of us there, but he was essentially always screaming and berating, the assistant, the hygienist, the manager. And he would do it in front of patients. He would do it in the waiting room. And, after a month, I just, there was no way I could continue working for him. The manager left, and she was the main one that kind of brought me in. And I just knew I couldn't stay there, so left the company. And pretty much the week after, that's when all the COVID stuff hit. So really there wasn't much I could do for work. So that's when I really started getting into trying to do streaming to try to get some kind of income and whatnot. And it was in October of 2020 that I was driving to pick up some stuff, because that's when I was really using marijuana to help me sleep. So I was driving to pick up stuff. I was heading back, and my car just was not functioning properly. And I managed to get it most of the way home. And we got the car towed. We brought it to a place, and they'd said that the engine was pretty much dead, and the cost to repair was going to be a lot. So we basically just sold the car to the shop, and that was it for me for a car. And yeah, where I am now, there's And that's where I am now. It's part of the reason why I feel really trapped, because there's really nothing for public transportation around here. I don't want to say it's the middle of nowhere where I am. It kind of is, though, because we're right off of a main road, and there's not really too much close to us. You have to go pretty far in either direction, and yeah, so that's where the feelings of being trapped, especially lately, have come from, and all of that. And I feel like a lot of my depression has just kind of seeped up since that point. Because the feelings of being trapped, and it's around this time I started, having, more dreams about my ex, and the problem whenever that happened was I would always just feel way more depressed the next day, and I would be down a lot, and yeah, so a lot of my down days was just from days where I had the dream the night before, and it just brought me down a lot. But, and this is kind of where we get to present day with all of that, but one of the things that happened last night, which, it's been, we were dating for 3.5 years. It's been 2016 to, the breakup was in, the cheating and the breakup was in June, July, somewhere in there. So we're getting about 7 years since all that happened. But last night I ended up having a dream with her again. Alright, actually, let me start over, because I think this video might have... Well, here's the thing, Roy. Here's the thing. Last night, before I went to sleep, let me... Because I watched a video by Casually Explained. This video about red flags, and I started, watching the video. I noticed quite a number of things from the relationship with the ex that really ticked off a number of those red flags. And last night, I ended up having another dream that involved her. But this dream was different, because a lot of the dreams where I get depressed, it's me trying to... it's either me just hanging out and having fun, or trying to chase her back. and whatnot. And last night was the first night where I had a dream with her involved, where I actually said, no, and actually tried to push her away. And honestly, that's part of that's the reason I'm even going through all of this in the stream right now. It's because I finally said no. And I think I'm getting I think I'm to the point where I'm finally ready to try and move on, because even I will say too, back in 2018 I tried I tried having a friend with benefits, and that didn't work because I just had a lot of hang-ups still. And I, of course, in the time I just made things awkward, and I definitely wasn't ready for that kind of a thing. But I think the dream I had last night, I think I finally am getting to that point where I don't need to forgive, but at the same time I can really start to move on. And I will say I've been doing a lot of, probably not right things. I stopped going to a lot of family events. Like there was even one where I drove to the place and I just sat in my car for about 10 minutes. I didn't go inside, and I basically just left. And I'm not saying I need to rush to go to these family events, but I think with what happened last night, I think I'm finally to a part where I hope I can, make changes to try to get back on the right foot. But the same time, I still don't know where to go with things. I will admit, not really. Not really having, like, I will say the people I've met online and the friends I've made through streaming, I truly do appreciate you guys. But it's, if I go back to the reason why I broke up with, the girl I was dating online, it really is different when you don't have friends with you in person to really help with that kind of a thing. So I definitely know I'm still gonna have my rough days, I've always struggled with depression through my life, but at least in terms with, the stuff with my ex and all of that, I think I'm finally to a point where I can really, I don't want to say forget about it, because if I try and do that, I'm just lying to myself, But I think I'm to a place where I don't want to say I'm more at peace with it, but I feel like I can at least really try and move on. And I'm not sure really where to start with all of it. Just because I have lost a lot in the process, especially, like I said, where I have the feeling of being trapped. But yeah, I think we can. I think at this point there's gonna be better days to come. So that's for sure. Acceptance. I I I don't know if there even is a right word for how I'm feeling with it. But I definitely think now, compared to before, I'm definitely in a better spot to try and move forward. Um, yeah. I have to admit, for me to sit here for well over an hour and to go over things like this in my personal life, because like I said, I honestly I don't talk much about my personal life. And there are reasons about that. Um, but really, I think the fact that I'm to this point, I think it really does show that I'm to a place where I am ready to try to move on. And just how do I better myself from here? Not sure what to do, where to go from here. But I think the biggest thing really is just trying to find myself again and yeah. All right.